We camped in the middle of Pine Hollow, a section of forest that few people still venture into. Some of the warnings were broken in half by weather or time, and others were etched onto antique wooden signs. One cautioned, "Do not camp beyond the creek." We were thrill-seekers, though. The challenge, the prospect of seclusion, and perhaps in private the rumors drew the five of us, Julia, Marcus, Leah, Sean, and myself. It was an uneventful first night. We set up 2 tents in a clearing by the creek, shared a bottle of inexpensive whiskey, and cooked hot dogs and beans over a roaring fire. Tales of disappearances, haunted highways, and urban tales began to circulate. Everything was enjoyable until Julia brought up her grandmother's caution. Gazing into the flames, Julia remarked, "She told me Pine Hollow devour the lost. Not just individuals. Time, memories, light." We chuckled. Uneasy giggles. Things had altered on the second night. The atmosphere seemed heavier. Still, birds stopped chirping as we could see. There was no longer even the sound of wind rustling pine needles. You only notice that silence when something is amiss. Around 2 in the morning, Sean vowed to have seen someone observing us from the trees. A tall person, not moving. There were no lights and no movement, so he assumed it might be a hunter. Only a shadow. He used a flashlight to look about, but all he saw were human footprints, bare, deep in the damp ground. However, none of us had removed our footwear. Leah woke up screaming the same night. She exclaimed, "I heard whispering." Inside the tent, adjacent to my ear, my name was mentioned. We made an effort to soothe her, said it was a dream, stress, or the drink. However, the trees had shifted by the following morning. I realize it sounds crazy. However, in order to keep our sense of direction, we had set up markers, tiny stones, rope fastened to twigs. They were all gone. As though no one had used the paths for years, they were once again overgrown after we had plowed through the brush. Then Julia looked at her compass. The needle whirled furiously. The fog rolled in that night, like smoke, heavy and thick. We were just able to see a foot ahead. The light did not pierce it when we lighted our lanterns. Instead, it stopped cold, as if it were being swallowed. The bells then rang out, faint, initially far away, like little wind chimes in a tempest, then nearer, as well as louder. Marcus was the first to disappear. He was sitting next to me roasting marshmallows 1 minute, and then he was gone. Not a sound. Do not yell. Just missing. The marshmallow was blackening, and his stick was still in the fire. We screamed his name into the trees as we looked. However, our voices were not very clear. Warped and reverberating, they returned to us. Sean claimed to have heard Marcus cry out for assistance from below. At daylight, we packed up. Nobody said much. Julia's eyes were sunken and she had turned pallid. She continued to hum to herself, a tuneless, low melody that none of us knew. Leah looked at her cell. There were pictures on her camera roll that none of us had taken. They slept in the tents and showed us. However, a tall figure was just visible behind the tent flap in every picture. In each one, closer. We had not snapped any pictures. We attempted to depart. Retrace your steps along the creek. However, the terrain bent. Places we had passed just hours before appeared deteriorated and older, as if they had been abandoned for decades. The trees grew taller. The moss thickened. The sky appeared darker as well, a never-ending dusk without the sun visible. Sean committed suicide by hanging on the 4th night. At morning, we discovered him dangling from a pine tree, with vines, not rope, tightly encircling his neck. Vines, bleeding sap, still green. His feet were just a few inches off the floor. He had his eyes open, and there were pine needles in his mouth. That night, the bells came back. We did not get any sleep. Julia eventually spoke again at that point. With composure, she stated, "It is observing from the roots. It listens through the bark and burrows in the ground. It was improper for us to sleep here. We were marked by it." I attempted to pull her out of the tent. However, she let out a scream. From the dirt beneath us emerged a voice. Not hers. Not any human beings. It sounded like us. It sounded like Marcus. "Assist me, please. It is cold here." Julia dashed off into the forest. She was too quick for me to follow with the lantern. She was kneeling at the brink of a sinkhole when I eventually located her. She had blood on her hands. Her nails were pulled off by the roots in the ground. "It needs one more," she remarked, glancing up at me. Then she leaped. She was completely engulfed by the emptiness. I ran. How I made it out is a mystery to me. The woodland changed and twisted, but I continued on. I did not sleep. I held my breath. I finally noticed light. Heard birds once more. Collapsed after stumbling onto a road. The arrival of help took hours. When they returned, they discovered a single tent that was torn and sun-bleached. They failed to locate the others. However, a perfect circle of charred pine needles was burned into the ground in the middle of the clearing. One footprint, too. Bare. Deep. Still warm. Story number 2. Devil's Hollow, which is no longer sold by petrol stations, was located on an old paper map. There were no phone signals or GPS numbers, only a red circle drawn by someone around an unnamed wooded area deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We believed it was ideal for our camping trip away from the grid. A true getaway. Tanya, Jordan, Lex, Chris, his younger brother Tyler, and I made up the 6 of us. We hiked 9 miles across crumbled stone roads and streams. We passed a half-demolished ranger station en route, with vines growing through broken windows. Inside, someone has scrawled in charcoal on the wall. "They arrived during the moon's sleep." We dismissed it with laughter. I believed it to be edgy graffiti. A joke, perhaps. Tanya, however, snapped a photo of it. I hope she didn't. It grew chilly that first night. Chilly and bitter. Unusually cold. Every wood, branch, and even the dry kindling we packed was wet, making it impossible for us to create a fire. As though the trees infused everything with dampness. We wrapped ourselves in layers, ate cold sandwiches, and attempted to sleep. However, none of us did. Sounds came from the forest. Neither the sounds of animals, neither bears, coyotes, or raccoons. The dragging sounds were sluggish and deep, like a hefty object being dragged through the brush. Jordan's watch beeped at 3:12 a.m. Every time he sets it for 3:12. It is a college internal joke. The dragging ceased at that point. We sat up, all of us awake. Then there was a tap on the tent side. Once, twice, 3 times. Frozen, we waited. Whether courageous or foolish, Chris unzipped the tent and shone his headlamp outside. Footprints were found. All around the tent. Dozens. Small, long-toed, bare feet that are buried deep in the ground are surrounding us. However, nobody was present. After that, Tyler did not sleep. The woods were silent once more the following morning. Too silent. No birds sang. There was no rustle of leaves. According to Lex, it was like being under water, thick, silent, and under pressure. Tanya gave us the picture she took of the message inside the ranger station at around noon. Only the message was different. The letters in charcoal now said, 6 came in. For will depart. The picture had not been touched. It was time-stamped and digitized. We attempted to persuade ourselves that she had misinterpreted it initially. However, we all recalled. Clearly, we heard whispers that night. Inside the tents, not out in the distance. Near our ears were faint voices. Breathy. Repeating names. Again and again. Tyler? 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 Tyler. Chris hurried outdoors after grabbing a knife. I did the same. He had wild eyes. We saw them at that point. Not animals. Not ghosts. A worse thing. Shapes, tall, expressionless figures, motionless, standing between the trees. Dozens. Hundreds. Skin as pale as stretched wax. They stared at you, yet they had no eyes. Lex let out a scream. One of them shifted. The forest came to life. The leaves trembled. The dirt moved. Lex was dragged backward into the forest by something. We shouted her name as we ran after her. Gone. Not a trace. Only her ripped-open backpack. Beside it, her water bottle was carefully placed. We returned to camp shortly before daybreak. Tanya had also left. She still had her sleeping bag zipped, but it was empty. No indication of difficulty. All she had left was her phone, facing up. Despite being damaged, the screen continued to shine. The camera was filming. Something behind her was slowly rising in the tent fabric's reflection. Tall, lanky. She brushed her hair aside with one hand. After packing, we departed. Tyler wanted to be carried on Chris's back. Tyler, however, did not move. Unblinking, he said the same word while gazing into the trees. Sleepers, sleepers, sleepers. Jordan attempted to raise him. For the first time in days, birds flew from the treetops as he shouted so loudly. Tyler refused to go. We took off running. Hours went by. Trees said it again. Returned landmarks, impossible feats. Even with the compass, we went in circles. The ranger station reappeared after that. Burnt after collapsing. The walls were smudged with ash. There was still smoke. There was a new statement inside, on the same wall where we had initially seen it. Your names are known to the watchers. We did not quarrel. Before collapsing on the highway, we raced into the night. We were lost and bleeding from the feet when a passing truck driver discovered us. There were just 4 of us who returned. Tyler was never located. Lex and Tanya are absent. No people. No proof. No signal. No help. What about Chris? Chris now talks to trees. Whispers to them while sitting in the woods behind his house. They whisper back, he says. Story number 3. It was not intended for us to locate the location. I could not get that out of my head. There were no map marks or paths that led there. Just a dense, undergrowth-choked forest and a quiet that feels like it is pressing against your chest. We were way off the grid on our 3rd day of trekking in the North Woods of Maine. Our self-proclaimed guide, Pete, had insisted on off-the-books camping, which refers to unexplored and untamed areas. When we asked him what he meant by holy fire land, he smiled. He declared, "There is always a fire, even in the absence of it." We camped in a clearing that did not seem right. It was too round and too tidy. As though something had previously exploded from the center, the trees that surrounded it leaned outward in a perfect circle. The fire started on its own that evening. No one touched a match, I promise you. The pit, a ring of old, blackened stones, sprang to life while we were gathering sticks and setting up our tents. Red and yellow flames, no smoke, no wood-cracking noise. We stopped. Pete didn't. Told you, he added with a smile. Sacred. I questioned him about it. He did not respond. He simply sat next to the fire as if it were an old friend. After we finished our meal and everyone else had gone to bed, I noticed Pete chatting with someone. However, nobody was present. He mumbled and nodded while crouching next to the fire. He paused as if he was paying attention. And as he spoke, the fire changed, dimming, flashing, almost breathing. Holding my breath, I watched from my tent. That is when I noticed the guy on the other side of the clearing. One of us was not involved. Standing motionless among the trees, too tall, too thin, like aged wax. Its skin glinted in the firelight. Just hollows, no eyes. It held up one hand, pointing at Pete with its long, bony fingers. Then in my direction. After that, it disappeared into the woods. I did not get any sleep. Pete was gone in the morning. His boots were still upright outside his tent. He had not damaged his backpack. But he was nowhere to be seen. Chris wanted to get out. Rachel as well. The compass, however, kept spinning. No GPS. Yesterday's tracks were gone. As though we had never come. The fire flared up again that night. It was not lit by us. We stayed away from it. However, it expanded, doubled in size. The base of the flames went blue, and the shadows stretched out over the clearing. I watched them move. Even while we were motionless, I swear to God, the shadows were shifting. Then it murmured. The fire mumbled. Rachel leaned closer. Too near. I shouted at her to back off. She didn't. She grinned. And entered it. Do not yell. Not a sound. No odor. She entered the fire as if it were a door. Gone. We packed. Ran. No trail. No escape. A never-ending forest that coiled back on itself. Nobody slept on the 4th night. The fire persisted. It trailed us. No matter how far we traveled or where we made camp, The fire was always there when nightfall arrived, burning higher and muttering names. Then it whispered mine. The last person to speak was Chris. He muttered back, standing too near. He turned to face us with an unnatural smile as his eyes glazed away. Then he fell to his knees and dug into the ground while yelling about a tunnel, a gate beneath the fire, and a voice that said, "We burn so you don't." The following morning he was gone. Only Danny and I remained. We did not talk, simply went for a walk. Even at noon, the woodland grew darker every day. A rumor was the sun. The calm became weighty rather than quiet, pressing. Danny broke on the fifth night. She screamed at the woods, flung her phone into the flames, and challenged them to seize her. They did. Not on fire. In the dark. Pitch-black tendrils encircled her legs and pulled her toward the trees as it slithered out of the woodland like smoke. Her voice trailed off into nothingness as I followed it. I returned by myself. 3 weeks later, a hunter discovered me by a river. My clothes ripped, my eyes bloodshot, and I was dehydrated. I was unable to talk, unable to walk. They discovered burns on the soles of my feet when they eventually brought me to the hospital. However, I never set foot in flames. Doctors said I had hallucinations. No holy fire land is mentioned in any records. Chris, Danny, Pete, and Rachel were nowhere to be seen. Since then, however, a fire has started in my backyard at precisely 2:37 a.m. No wood, no fuel, no cause, only fire and murmurs. Story number 4. When we arrived at the Pines, there were 6 of us. An old-growth forest outside Black Hollow, untouched, undisturbed, and, according to locals, best left alone. We laughed at the rumors, the ones about missing hikers and strange lights, voices that call your name in your own voice. That added to the excitement. The type of fear you read about is what we desired. The kind that, until you see it, seems phony. The trunks of the trees rose like cathedral columns, and they were uncomfortably close to one another. Only the steady creak of old wood shifting in the darkness. No birds, no wind. We spent hours searching for a level area large enough to camp. That first night, everything seemed normal. The fire crackled. We drank, told ghost stories, dared each other to wander into the trees alone for 5 minutes. It was fun, until the tents were gone when we woke up. Each of the 6, gone. As if we'd never set them up. Every pole, tarp, and sleeping bag had disappeared, but our backpacks remained. The ground was smooth, undisturbed. There were no stakes at all. We placed the blame on one another. Argued. I believed someone was playing a practical joke. Then Lily pointed out that the tree bark nearby looked peeled. Not cut, peeled, as if something had scraped against the trunks, in long, curling shreds. Additionally, the word "stay" was etched deeply into the wood of every trunk surrounding the area. That night we didn't sleep. No tents, just sleeping bags and the fire, which burned lower than before, like the trees were sucking the heat away. Jacob swore he saw someone walk between the trees. No footsteps, just a tall hat and a large coat. We chuckled uneasily. However, nobody chuckled when a second person passed behind us and the firelight flickered once again. Lily was gone by morning. There was her bag, unopened. Her boots remained next to it, but she was nowhere to be seen. We circled the clearing, screamed, and called. Nothing. Not a single footprint. No branches were broken. In the trees, the same terrible creaking. We ought to have departed. We attempted to depart. Even though we spent hours walking back the way we came, nothing changed in appearance. Above us, trees leaned together like hands begging for our souls, bent in strange ways. The sunlight hardly showed. We continued coming across the same area no matter how far we walked, and every time we did, a new word was etched into the trees. Stay. Still. Silent. After that, we did not talk. The fire would not light that night. Each match was expelled. The lighter sparked and died. Back to back, barely breathing, we sat in the dark. The voices then began to speak. Our voices, not whispers. Lily called out to me, laughing. Jacob heard a lullaby sung by his deceased grandmother. The sound of his own voice pleading with the trees for assistance made even Mike, the skeptic, shudder. Jacob ventured into the darkness that evening. He remained silent, simply stood, gave a single nod, and moved between the trees. We let out a yell. He didn't turn around. He never returned. We stayed up until morning, and when the weak light broke through, the words on the trees had changed again. 3. We were 3. Mike lost his temper. Food was thrown into the trees, shouted into the woods. Dare anyone was observing us to come out and engage in combat. Stop, I said. Anna pleaded. He did not pay attention. He vanished that evening. Not when you are walking. Not in his sleep. We blinked and he was gone. He sat next to us for a moment. The next, there was nobody in his space. He left his luggage unopened. His sneakers are still warm. Anna lost it. Crying, trembling. Said she felt them watching us all night. Inside the trees, I sensed them. Claimed to have observed the trunks breathing. We need to keep going, I urged her. It did not matter, she said. That as soon as we entered the woodland, it picked us. There were just 2 words on the trees the following morning. You. Now. All day, Anna held on to my arm. We did not communicate. Simply went for a walk. We discovered a tree at noon that was different from the others. It had thicker, darker bark and dead leaves arranged in a perfect circle around its base. Anna gave it too much attention. I drew her away. She resisted me, yelled that she was being called. She sprinted in its direction. She did not make it. She was drawn into the earth by something. I watched her screaming and kicking her legs, but like quicksand, the earth engulfed her, disappeared in a matter of seconds. Not a hole, no mound, just the movement of roots in the soil. I ran. I am not sure how long, days perhaps. Here the sun does not rise. The stars remain stationary. I ceased to tally the clearings. The trees all have my name engraved on them. There was something new in the last one. Stay, still, silent, sleep, sink. Since then, I have not seen another person. I am still in the pines, I believe. I am no longer in need of food. Perhaps take a nap. I simply wait while sitting. Now the trees talk to me. In the bark, they show me things. Faces, eyes, mouths that scream. And when I examine it carefully, I see my